Assad is an animal, so says our president in a battle of tweets. We hope the tweets aren't merely for show. We hope it's backed up by some force, because he's been threatened before. We've talked about a red line and all this, but he's used chemical weapons again against one of his own cities, and little children are dying in Syria. Trump says there'll be a big price to pay for using chemical weapons. And the president also blasted Vladimir Putin and Iran for supporting Syria. So what is the world going to do? They're waiting to see, is the U.S. actually going to move on this or let him get away with it?
Well, meanwhile, there was another military action in Syria today, a missile strike on an air base. Dale Hurd tells us who's being blamed for that attack.
Russia says it was 2 Israeli F-15 warplanes flying through Lebanese airspace that carried out the strikes on the airbase in central Syria today. The strike reportedly killed at least 14 people, including Iranians active in Syria. Syrian state media first blamed the United States for the attack, but the Pentagon said it wasn't us, and Israel's foreign ministry had no comment. Today's strike came after another chemical weapons attack Saturday against Syrian civilians, and after President Trump had tweeted, "Many dead, including women and children, in mindless chemical attack in Syria." President Putin, Russia, and Iran are responsible for backing animal Assad. Big price. In a Syrian hospital, victims gasping for air, men, women, and children. The gas attack came just after dusk on Saturday near the capital of Damascus. More than 40 people have died. The regime of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, backed by the Russians, deny using chemical weapons and claim this video was fabricated. While the U.S. says it did not attack the Syrian airbase today, the White House is not ruling out a future military response.
I wouldn't take anything off the table. These are horrible photos. We're looking into the attack at this point.
And Republican Senator Lindsey Graham is urging the president to take strong action, calling on him to show a resolve that President Obama never did, in order to get the situation in Syria right.
Well, it's a defining moment in his presidency because he has challenged Assad in the past not to use chemical weapons. We had a one-and-done a missile attack, so Assad's at it again. But President Trump can reset the table here. To me, I would destroy Assad's air force. I would create safe zones in Syria.
Trump will meet with his senior military leadership today, which is also the first day on the job for new National Security Advisor John Bolton, who in the past has advocated strong military action against Syria. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Thanks, Dale. It looks like one report has as many as 8 different chemical attacks since Trump has become president. He's got to act on it. He has no choice anymore. You know, the amazing thing about this Assad is he was trained as a physician in Europe. He isn't just some bumpkin from out of the goat herds, goat pens in central Syria. He's a sophisticated man, and to do this kind of barbaric act is just it's mind-boggling. I can't understand it. I really can't. But he's got to be dealt with, and what Lindsey Graham said, absolutely destroy his Air Force, get in there and blow his military capabilities to pieces, and don't let the Russians deter you. Get in there regardless. And listen, Putin will back off. He's not about to take on the United States and have a war over Syria. He won't do it. Well, in just a few minutes, we'll show you how Israel has been helping victims of the Syrian civil war. But first, in other news, North Korea says it's ready to make a big step toward a peaceful solution of its nuclear standoff with the U.S. and the world. Ephraim Graham has that.
Pat, for the first time, North Korea has told the U.S. it is prepared to discuss the denuclearization of the Korean peninsula. The confirmation comes from Pyongyang directly. This discussion will take place when Kim Jong-un meets with President Donald Trump. The Trump administration hopes to hold that summit late next month, but there could still be some stumbling blocks in talks about North Korea dropping its nuclear and missile tests. The North may want concessions the U.S. or other countries like South Korea aren't prepared to give. But the announcement does offer the potential for a diplomatic breakthrough. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban decisively won re-election Sunday, and his party appeared to have won a supermajority in the parliament. He calls it a, quote, opportunity to defend Hungary. Orban has said the country needed a government dedicated to Christian values. Orban also strongly warned against Islamic immigration in Europe, calling it a threat to European Christian culture. Critics worry Orban will use his power to intensify his attacks on immigration. His critics have called him a racist and a xenophobe, but the people of Hungary clearly support him. Back here at home, 2/3 of the people who leave the prison system will return. And while lawmakers on Capitol Hill, along with the White House, are working to make changes in the legal system, Amber Strong has the story of a national ministry making its own changes, one inmate at a time, to give them a second chance.
The Trump administration has designated April Second Chance Month. Sean Hopwood says he knows a little something about that.
My story starts with having to stand before a federal judge in 1998 as he sentenced me to 12 years and 3 months in federal prison.
His story has a lot in common with other testimonies heard at Prison Fellowship's prayer walk. And it also has something in common with the 600,000 men and women who will be released from prison this year. But one thing was different for Hopwood. He was released and never looked back.
I found that I had an aptitude for the law, and I started helping other prisoners while I was there.
Hopwood had a valuable skill, but even for him, the road from prison to success wasn't easy.
It was really hard. It was the height of the recession. No one was finding work, let alone the guy that just did 11 years in federal prison.
For most offenders, it's a vicious cycle: release and repeat. In fact, 2/3 of offenders end up back in prison.
People, when they leave prison, face a lot of obstacles, trying to find employment, trying to find, get access to education, the right to vote.
For 40 years, Prison Fellowship has used the love of Christ, along with mentorship and job training, to overturn those obstacles. That extra help can mean the difference between reformation and recidivism.
We do a lot of work inside prisons to prepare people for that reentry time, and then we link them with churches once they're released so that they can find a welcoming place when they go home.
That was certainly the case for Samuel Perez.
Prison Fellowship has been instrumental in really just providing opportunities.
After bouncing from group home to group home, Perez found his family in the streets, leading to a life of crime and eventually 11.5 years in prison.
While this was one of the lowest points in my life, it was also one of the best because this was around the time that I began to pursue my relationship with Jesus Christ, or really he began to pursue me.
The recent Liberty University graduate says even though God may have forgiven him, that didn't mean society had.
Regardless of the changes that you make, regardless of how far removed you are from the crimes that you've committed, you're always labeled as an ex-felon.
He's been there and now works with Prison Fellowship to help former inmates. Hopwood is doing the same, but through the legal system.
I do litigation on behalf of people.
Recently, the Georgetown law professor was featured on 60 Minutes. It catapulted him into the limelight, the White House, and at the center of policy change.
Can't say we're the land of liberty on one hand, and on the other recognize that we incarcerate our citizens at a greater rate than almost any other country on the planet.
He says success also takes the love of the community.
Most every successful reentry story I've ever seen involved community.
Hopwood says that community is often found in the church. After all, new beginnings are at the heart of the gospel message.
If you believe in grace and redemption, you have to believe in giving second chances to people who've committed crimes.
In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen.
Amber Strong, CBN News, Washington.
Breaking cycles, one inmate at a time. Pat?
Thank you. You know, ladies and gentlemen, we did a series about a nation of criminals, and I think the amount of legal penalty that's found in the laws are just extraordinary. There's hardly one single human being in America who doesn't break some law because there's so many rules and regulations, many of which you don't even know exist. And the amount of incarceration in America is just incredible. You know, the whole idea, well, just lock them up. Whoever they are, just lock them up. And, yeah, I'm for law and order. Therefore, let's give them bigger sentences. This is an insanity. To think the United States of America has a higher prison incarceration rate than any other nation on the face of the earth, including Russia and China. I mean, who ever heard of such a thing? We've got people behind bars, and the whole idea of, you know, possession of a couple of ounces of marijuana or something like that gets somebody a jail sentence. And the possession, I mean, the sentences were so extreme, 5 and 10 years for the possession of a small quantity of some controlled substance. It was insanity, and we haven't fixed it yet. It's still got to be fixed. And especially all the criminal sanctions that are put into administrative rules. And I would recommend immediately, just immediately, just zeroing out all the criminal sanctions that have been put in by administrative agencies, every single one of them. And then the ones that are passed by Congress, that's a different matter. But I think to have this huge weight of incarceration is so expensive, and it's so costly in human lives. And yes, something's got to be done, but the fact, you know, they get to prison, and what do they have? Well, they're schools for crime. They aren't being rehabbed, they're being trained to be criminals.